Welcome to the Eltropy Exchange podcast, where leaders of community financial institutions connect, learn, and stay ahead. In each episode, we sit down with industry executives, innovators, and experts for candid conversations about the challenges and opportunities shaping CFIs today. At Eltropy, we believe conversations matter. Let's dive in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Eltropy Exchange. My name is Michael Pupil, Vice President of the Collections Business Unit at Eltropy. And today I am joined by Park Broome, CEO of Loyalty Credit Union in Florida. Park, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too.
Excited for you to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction of you to the listeners or the viewers that are here. And so for those watching or listening, Park has spent just over 27 years in the financial services industry, with the majority of that time specifically in credit unions. Previously, he served as the Chief Strategy Officer for Loyalty Credit Union prior to accepting his current role as President and CEO that you accepted in the summer of 2024. So congratulations on coming into your first year.
Coming up to 1 year. Yep, pretty close.
It's exciting. I think that you've told me that your time has been spent in the industry and it includes things like operations, member services, consumer and commercial lending operations, and executive leadership. But the thing that I think is most impressive is the commitment to the communities that you serve, where you sit on boards and committees from things like the Chamber of Commerce, the United Way, Big Brothers Big Sisters, local museums, the Tallahassee chapter of the League of Credit Unions and the affiliates. You hold a bachelor's degree in business administration from Flagler College, and you also have a designation for the Credit Union Development Educator, as well as the Credit Union Business Lending Professional. Park, is there anything that I'm missing there on this? I mean, it's wildly impressive.
It sounds like it's a whole bunch, but I feel like it's very little.
Well, I'm going to throw on top of this that today is Juneteenth. So not only do we get to have this conversation, but you've also carved out time for us on a holiday. So I don't know if thank you is the right language. It seems too weak for the gratitude that we have.
It's all part of the job. That's what we do.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. And for those that were watching, you could probably see the Park and I were logging into this in full laugh mode. We've had no fun having these conversations at all. And so hopefully this is going to be enlightening for some, but most importantly, fun for everybody, including the two that are on this podcast right now. Park, I would love to start the conversation right from the beginning. You have a very interesting path in the industry. I'd like you to take us to your first role, which I think starts in your teens with the credit union industry. So take us back to young Park days.
Yeah, so young Park days was Park didn't want to stay in high school all day. So at lunchtime, I wanted to go to lunch, and then I wanted to go make money. So I actually, through the luck of knowing someone at the credit union my parents did their financial services at, I got a job in the file room at that credit union. And when I say the file room, I mean the room with the big manila envelope files with number codings that might have documents that were 20 years old in them. So that's how I got my start, part-time in high school, making spending money, for the fun weekend extravaganzas. And so, yeah, I was very lucky to get in the door at that age and really just have hardly ever got out.
Your literal story is from the file room to the CEO.
Right.
You and everything in between.
Sounds crazy.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And so for those that are listening, I mean, I think that is one of the big pulls to the credit union industry. It's not uncommon for people to have pretty long tenure, in the credit union industry. And so I think people fall in love with it. And it is an amazing story that, from start to now where you are.
And I'm sure I'm one of many, you know what I mean? That's just, we talk to people all the time. We've got lots of employees that have been with us 40 plus years. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, there you go. Well, now that you're in the driver's seat as CEO, talk a little bit about the mindset of planning. You made a comment, offline, of course, as we were having conversations, that your big kind of reach is going to be to try to drive the credit union to kind of punch above the weight, so to speak. And so today, Loyalty is roughly at about $300 million in assets under management. But talk about the mindset for planning long-term growth. What's the vision?
Well, historically in the credit union industry, we have always been, in my opinion, and everyone has a different opinion, but we've been a reactive side of things, right? What is everybody else doing? So let's go do that. being that I've worked in the credit union space, sometime in the bank space, and come back, it really is important to me that we become proactive. So let's get ahead of it. Now, we are not the biggest credit union in our markets. We are probably one of the smaller ones in our markets across the Florida Panhandle. But at the same time, is we have the ability to, like you said, punch higher than ourselves, right? Punch harder, because we can be more agile to a certain degree because of our size. I think the other thing with that, though, is really that, we as an institution is we have a lot of ability to grow. And to do that, we've got to be proactive. So we've got to get ahead of what's out there for institutions based on our size. Because really, if you look at us being around 300 million in assets plus or minus on a monthly basis right now, our next big hurdle will be about $500 million. So that's what we're looking for. And to me, that's a 5 to 10 year plan in our aspect of things.
Yeah, very exciting. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because now that you take the helm as CEO, you have this 5-year plan, and this is the next hurdle that you're getting. Talk to us a little bit about, the culture shift of now you being behind the wheel, and, how do you keep that 5-year, kind of vision, and how do you empower the staff to really take shape of the vision that you have for the credit union?
Well, I think a lot of it is just open conversations with them. Our credit union historically is a credit union of mergers. If you look back to the original days of Central Credit Union of Florida, which was our original name, we were the Central Credit Union for State of Florida credit union employees. Okay, so we had branches all over the state back then. But you had to work for a credit union in the state of Florida to be our member. That was the crux of it, okay? In the process of our most recent merger with Tallahassee Leon Federal Credit Union, where I was working, we actually learned that when Central was founded, the current CEO of Tallahassee Leon was one of the original board members. We didn't even learn that until we were in the process of the merger itself, which was great. All the full circle pieces right there. But so what we say in that is really, we have lots of experience of lots of different mergers. We've got I can count on both my hands the number of mergers that have happened with these institutions over time. With that, you have team members that have all of that knowledge of not only being there for a long time and being long tenured, but also why things were done the way they were done.
Sure.
And so when we talk about really moving the needle and thinking proactively and moving forward, we're trying to work really hard to say, we have all this institutional knowledge. Tell us why it was done this way. We might not continue to do it that way, but we need the backstory, and you have the backstory. And that, to me, is a huge connection piece for our teams, because these people know it and they're being asked. And that's the key. Why did it happen that way? What was the cause of it? Was it good or bad? If not, how do we move forward from there? And even if it was great, there's still ways to move forward and be better at it. We work on a really big mentality in our shop of work smarter, not harder, and be proactive, not reactive. So
it's very interesting, because I feel like there's a new, or maybe there's always been a little bit of an undercurrent of mergers, but it feels like there have been more recently, and like you said, you've been through a few of them before. How has that transpired? Have you found it difficult to kind of orient the segs together? Because oftentimes the segs are going to be a little bit different. So how do you mold not just the employees, but also the members as well? How do you tackle that? Or how do you see that molding in the future?
Well, and some of that, I think, because credit unions were founded on the seg group mentality, select employee groups. Then we've all gone to community charters. Central was actually the first credit union in the state to adopt a community charter setup. So that's another fun fact about our institution, is we were the leader in that, where you could work in these counties and be within a certain mile radius of our credit unions to be a member without having to be, a legacy seg group. So with that aspect of it is, we really look and say, what is in the best interest of all the people involved? So both sides coming in when you do a merger, right? We're going to take the best of both worlds and provide that to the members as much as possible. We're also going to say is, how do they interact and how do they do things different, and what opportunity do we bring in with this organization that will make the legacy one better, or vice versa? There's all kinds of ways to do mergers nowadays, and you're right. We're seeing a lot more movement out there with the larger ones merging into each other. That is an interesting twist that I can't say I would have thought would happen 5 years ago or so. But you've had a couple huge ones just announced, and I know people at some of those institutions, and they are all on board and think it's great. It's interesting though, because that does move them farther away from our size, right? And to me, sometimes it's let them get a little bit bigger, so we're really not that big of a on their radar. But that being said, is as we see the number of institutions dwindle because of mergers, they're all done for good reasons, unless it's something where it's a action
They're in
taken
hardship.
by a legislative body or something like that, or a
Yeah.
regulatory body. So everybody's in it to do the right thing for the members. We go into these things, when we look at things like that, is really the important thing is everybody else going to be better at the end of the day? We're not going in it to make someone's situation worse, the members unhappy, things like that. That doesn't mean you won't have service recovery instances you have to deal with in those, for sure. And some things might not look the same or sound the same, but at the end of the day, it's really for the benefit of the members. And how do we help our members every day? Because again, we look at it and say, well, I look at it and say, I have internal and external members. My team members are members just like our external members.
Sure.
So it's going to affect them just as much as it's going to affect anybody else. And so we lean a lot on those conversations with them, is how is that going to help you?
Well said. I think the scariest part about that whole piece is one word: change. And we all know how people love change. It's so easily adopted, and there's no fear ever when it comes to change. How do you tackle that? And I imagine another C word of communication is obviously a really big part of it. But is there anything that you have learned over the years that now that you're sitting in the CEO role that you're going to change that approach, or maybe just double down on the strategies that you've seen that are effective?
I think the biggest thing is change can't be a surprise. You've got to get ahead of it as much as possible, knowing sometimes it's not perfect. If you know change is going to happen, involve people early in that potential change and get their feedback early. I am a huge proponent of feedback as a gift, whether it's good or bad. But the earlier I can get you in there involved to start talking to me about it, the better chance we can work through any of those reservations or concerns you might have. And that goes on the membership side too. Any of us are willing to talk to our members about anything on any day. And yes, we cannot always make everyone happy, but as long as we can feel confident knowing that we're trying to do things for their betterment, that's what we have to go by.
Talk about a soundbite. Change can't be a surprise. I don't think I've heard it as clear, and as soon as you said it, I had that little light bulb go off where it's like, man, so simple, but makes a lot of sense. And especially if you give the context as to why the change has to happen, then you start to alleviate some of the fears, or at least you get a greater understanding as to maybe why change is necessary to happen. And so really, really good point. Well, I'd love to, kind of in the same vein, but I'd love to shift gears. Obviously, technology being the bread and butter that we've got, the strategic adoption that you've had with technology has also been what I would say one of the leaders in the industry, right? It's a little bit easier, I think, for some larger organizations that have much larger budgets to be able to kind of dip into some technologies, but you have found it, I think easy, regardless of the size, to adopt technology in different areas. And so I'd love for you to just kind of give a broad overview of what your strategy is, why you adopt technology, some of the use cases that you've seen that have helped out, not just for the members, but also staff and the organization itself. Maybe give the listeners a little bit of an insight to your vision when it comes to technology, because that is an ever-changing landscape, it feels.
Yeah, and I think that you're spot on. I mean, technology there's no end game, right? Every day something new comes out, every day something changes. We have really worked to adopt to that and adapt to that. Not only adopt that change is coming early on, but adapt to how does that look for us in our day to day. We went from a period where we didn't do much change to where we came into some instances where we had to make change. That it was evident we needed other alternatives. We needed better products and services for our members, better communication channels for our members. And some of those were it had to almost hit us in the face to see it. You can't always forecast everything. And so what we did is we really, and when we talk about Eltropy specifically, I think back to the first demo we had some Eltropy folks come on site. Our whole senior management team was off site in another town at one of our other locations because we had an event we had to go to. So all of our senior management team that would, in a normal world, would be involved in those first demos. We were all on Zoom watching this. But what we had done is we had set up, we knew that we wanted some technology with a texting and chatting aspect of things that was more advanced than what we had. we had gotten to Eltropy through our partnership with Leverage, which is through our league. And we knew that we were going to see a good demo if Leverage was, discussing them with us. But what we did is, in our absence of not being there, is we filled the room with the people that would be touching that product quicker than anybody else. So these were all the way down to your member facing individuals, your people on the phones, your people trying to collect payments. We filled the room for Eltropy to do a demo. And the reason was because we knew if and when we went forward, these people's lives were going to be changed the quickest, right? And we needed them to understand whether this was the end product we went with or not. We needed them to understand this. We had to look at doing this and what did they like and not like. So really, being off site as all senior management on that day, we just sat back and really got to watch, right? Because you've got, the demo happening in this boardroom and you have 15 people in there live. We didn't get much word in. And that's okay, because again, we're not the ones using it day to day, 8 hours, right?
Right.
But what we also did is we had decided when we went down that road that this was really where we wanted to start changing the mindset of, we're going to involve you early and often. Okay. You're going to be in those initial discussions about these things. Not saying we're going to do it, not saying we're going to sign up tomorrow or that this is going to be the product we go with, but you've got to be in those discussions because you're going to be the person that lives and breathes it, in the member aspect every day. And it was very telling to us after that initial call that everyone in that room thought we were on the right track and were ready to sign a contract, and we're like, well, okay, let's work through this. Like, that's great, but that's what we want. We wanted that interaction. We wanted those questions. We wanted those follow-up conversations. And if we had waited and done all of that and handed over and said, here's your training on how to use this product, we wouldn't have gotten that.
Is this a typical strategy that, Eltropy aside, and I love, because now we have a great relationship, obviously serving, the members that you have your team, which the outcome was a terrific one. But do you do this consistently, that any service that you're looking at, you typically engage the frontline group to get their buy-in first before making an executive decision?
We do. We have got a very skilled group of managers, frontline staff, vice presidents that have lots of not only lots of institutional knowledge with our institution, but in the business themselves, right? And people helping people. And so what we do is when we look at these now, we look at these and say what tools either they find them or we find them, right? We tell them to bring us stuff to look at, and we have instituted some of those things, right? That they have seen at something. Because we want to give them the tools to do their job better. We want them to have a great quality of life where they're not stressed and think they have to work overtime and weekends and things like that. What do you need to do your job more efficiently, smarter, not harder, and have a better outcome for you and the member, right? With the member leading. And so we do that. If my job as a CEO and our job, especially on our executive team, is to really try to stay out of the way as much as possible on some things, right? Give them the tools and the resources they need and the confidence to do what they know how to do. Knowing that we are always there and we're always going to be involved, but we shouldn't be in the weeds of what you do every day, because that means we're holding you up if we have to do that.
I love the approach, because the approach is, I think, for many people, the adoption of technology sometimes results in the elimination of roles. And you were very, very clear in explaining the purpose of adopting this technology. And it wasn't to necessarily, kind of sunset roles, but rather make those individuals more empowered, making them stronger, better, having to work less, or relieving some of the stress. I can't tell you how many, teams that we've spoken to that are either short-staffed or having to work, harder with less on their plate. Then you couple that with some macroeconomic factors, and not to scare the entire listener group here, but
don't jinx us.
Yeah, exactly. I'll keep knocking on my head here, but that's the whole point of technology, is that sure, it may remove activities. Like if we go back to the beginning of your file room, filing those documents may not necessarily be a job anymore or an activity within a job. But the idea is now that you still maintain your team, and now you're orienting them into, let's say, member-facing, activities or working for the unit. At least that's how I'm perceiving this. And I imagine this is done by design so that the whole team buys into the change or the adoption or the adaptation of technology.
It is. I mean, think about how many times you or me or anybody has decided to take PTO and go on vacation, and you spend 3 days getting everything ready for when you're gone, right? I
Yep.
do this way, this is this way, this is this way. Really working to put tools in place where it's a seamless transition and someone else can flip that switch and be good to go. That's important for us, because then our continuity's there for the members, which is always the first and most important thing, right? That the members are taken care of no matter what it is, but also that our team is not worried about it either leading up to or when they're gone.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I don't think I've ever taken a vacation where I've turned off the switch for more than
Right.
24 to 48 hours.
Exactly.
Which can't be a healthy thing. I think you do need to disconnect, and that's where technology or the team comes into play to kind of let your mind kind of rest.
Well, and you bring up a great comment there, because we really work hard to explain to our teams that we want you to be able to turn it off, right? We know you have capable team members working under you and side by side with you. We have the tools in place. We want you to go enjoy that time and come back refreshed and not worry about it the whole time you're gone. So
That message needs to be felt across not just the credit union industry, but I think the nation as a whole. I think that unplug is such a healthy thing to do, and that's where technology comes in. The biggest talking point with technology today are the 2 letters of an alphabet that I think have been used probably in 90% of conversations today, and those letters are A and I. Talk to us a little bit about how you view AI for the credit union, the members, the staff. I know that we've had a couple of conversations about this, and you're certainly looking at it, as is many credit unions and financial institutions across the country. But what is your take? What have you seen? What are you looking at? And where do you see it going?
Well, to me, AI is not. There are instances where AI can replace a position, right? Or an employee or a team member, or a process or a procedure. At the same time, though, I look at a lot of AI and say it's there to supplement it,
Yep.
to refine it, to help it. That's kind of our mentality on it. Are we integrating AI? Yes. Are we looking at more AI options? We are, but it's not to replace people. It's to, one, bring on efficiencies, make a better experience for our members, again, in all cases, but also to uncover things that we haven't thought about, it's funny. I think back, and we talk about AI a lot. And we talk about let's talk about learned AI. The more you give it, the more you know, right? That's what we are. The more we learn from people, the more we talk to people, the more we get feedback from people, the more we know about how to potentially do something. So it's always been there. It's just now we can do it by typing it into a screen or talking to something or things like that. But that doesn't change the fact that someone still needs to be on the other side to validate, make sure it's right, and then still, even if you use AI to help your members might still just want to talk to you. And that's okay. Like most institutions, we understand there's a need to kind of go for a younger membership to some degree, but we have strong, loyal members that have been with us many, many years. And at the same time, those might be the members that come in twice a week to a branch, and we're the only live person they talk to. And that's important,
So true. So true. I make this joke often, and obviously being on the collection side, my conversations tend to tilt more towards collections. And I always ask, do you guys ever receive checks that are sent into the mail to the branch? And, everybody kind of nods, and they said, yeah, we do. It's not often, but we do. You're not going to start to advertise saying, don't send me a check. Right. And so that technology is not going to go away. And I use that word, kind of loosely when I say writing a check being technology. But the idea is you just find the best workflow or the easiest workflow in order to process that check until eventually that workflow no longer exists, right? Kind of like rotary phones. Nobody's going back to that. And so the idea is, well, how do you do this, but also being able to serve? You mentioned credit unions having potentially the need to look at a younger demographic. I totally agree with you. The average age of credit union members across the country is around 52, 53, where the average age of an American is hovering around 38. There is a big spread there, and the data does not point in the right direction for organic growth, hence some of the M&A activity that's happening. But what that ultimately does is reduce the number of institutions that are out there, which now you're reducing choice, and you're also merging segs together. It seems like you guys had a really good run of kind of coming full circle where there may have been acquisitions or mergers, but they were very tightly related with each other. Whereas some mergers that I've seen, that has not necessarily been the case, and then communication getting very different or more difficult to execute. Does this lead into really a digital first kind of member experience, or are you trying to maintain, all the swim lanes of, older tech and newer tech?
I think in our individual case, it will be keeping, channels for all of them, right? A digital first channel for people that want digital first, but a true dedicated traditional financial services option for those that want that. Because it's not like you have two silos. All these people want this and all want this. You've got people that cross reference there, right? And want both. Certain times they want something, certain times they want another. I think, like us, like other institutions are going through right now, is what is that happy medium and how do you do that, right? How do you provide all of those services where you never have to speak to them in person, potentially see them in person, but also have it ready that if they come in one day, you're ready to do that. It is there's no secret sauce to it in my mind yet. There's no, here's the checklist and this checklist is going to work every time. A lot of it depends on your membership, the potential membership that you want to go after also, you know what I mean? It also depends on how you operate, and your internal members, what are they seeing and what do they want to be doing? Because it's really tough to pick a course and chart that course and go down that, that path if you don't have buy-in from your team.
So true. So true. I love the approach that you're taking, and one of the soapboxes that I get on, recently is to kind of combat the payday lenders who are almost uniquely digital first, probably about 90 to 10, digital versus on-site. They do have some locations and branches where you can do things like cashing checks, etc. But the payday lender experience is one that I think it is talked about, but I think it needs to be talked about a little bit more. If there was ever proof in the pudding to say that rates are not the driving force behind, of a vehicle like an auto loan or a mortgage or any type of loan, the proof is in those payday lenders charging in some areas 500, 600%. ARR over the course of the year. I mean, there isn't a single credit union, in the country that would be even remotely close to 10% of that total. And so to the betterment of the individual, it's amazing how most people get pushed towards that payday lender, and it is all because of ease of use. That's all it is. And so I believe that this is where, your adoption, or why you are so keen on adopting technology first with your team members, so that they believe in the ability of technology to take care of the members, and then ultimately the members engaging in the swim lane that they want, including things like a digital first. Like if they never come into the branch, that's not necessarily a bad thing for you, or you don't view that as a bad thing, so long as the member is served the way that they want to be served.
Yeah, convenience is whatever the member says it is, and every member's different, right? I mean, yes, there's a definition of convenience, but if you ask 10 members, each one of them is going to tell you something different on what that means to them. Yeah. So
for sure,
it is an ever evolving thing, and we're never going to be 100% right on everything. We know that, you know what I mean? And there's going to be service breaks at times, and we can't be immune to that. What works for one person might not work for the next. So how do we talk through that and work through that with that member?
So true. And the underpinning kind of, theme is always communication. And so those members that prefer technology will communicate in different ways. I mean, I poke fun at my nephews all the time because they use language that I understand the English language, but when they use words in a succession, sometimes I don't get the gist, and I'm a little bit older than my nephews.
I get it.
Yeah, there you go. You know exactly what I'm trying to say here. Yeah. And so, one of my nephews is 15, turning 16 very soon. So it freaks me out that he's going to be on the road a little bit, because I love him, but he's a little bit of a bonehead, and I love him to death. But the language that he uses is very different. And so now how do we communicate, to those individuals to be able to respond? And I find it challenging. And so I would imagine that for institutions that don't have, a very deep connection, how do you communicate? How do you know what it is that they want or like when you're not being able to communicate? And I ask all the time, like if you have a member who is late on a bill, or that you're trying to solicit a service, like you have a promotional rate, and you're sending it to a 20, 21, 22-year-old, and you are also going to send it to a 50, 55, 60-year-old, is it the same template? And the vast majority of the time, it is the exact same language. It's the exact same, message that's being sent out. And to me, that seems like a gap. Do you approach communication differently when it comes to individual? How do you approach communication?
So I would say our communication is an evolving process, because really you hit it. You've got to know the person to know how they want to communicate first off, right?
There you go.
So you've got to build a relationship. There's always going to be bumps in the roads with that. There's going to be learning instances in that. But, a great example is I was at a conference a couple years ago, and they were talking about, the evolution of like a checking account, right? And that most, millennials and what is that, Gen Y, Gen X, I'm past those years. So they don't even call them checking accounts because they don't write checks.
Right.
All they have is a debit card. They don't call it a checking account. So when we talk about things like that, like,
so true.
We had this discussion internally recently because we're looking at redoing some products, and one of our benefits and features on one of ours was free online banking. When has anyone paid for online banking in the past 5 years or 10 years? Right? Very rarely, unless maybe you have a very integrated commercial banking system or something. You know what I mean? Like a commercial account. But so when we talk about those things, like, someone that we might want to target at a younger age, they expect it to be free. They don't expect that you would have ever charged for it. So we talk about, like, what does that nomenclature look like? How are we going to tackle those in our processes of really revamping what we're doing now to really help, make it make sense to them, I guess you could say, for the lack of a better word. Not that it doesn't make sense, but how do you, this is what they expect. It's just the given for them. So it's a great adventure we're on. I'll tell you that.
Couldn't agree more. I think the supercharge to all of this, for better or worse, was obviously the pandemic. I think that was the steroid shot in the arm that, forced everybody to kind of rethink communication, remotely or digitally, because even those that would have preferred the face-to-face interactions were forced to go down a path to adopt technology if they wanted to get from point A to point B, which allowed the entire, kind of country to not turn back. Once they used it and they saw that it was successful and safe and easy, then why do I need to jump in my car and, drive 15 minutes in order to do it? Even if it is convenient, it was more convenient to do it that way. Talk a little bit, being in the Panhandle, you guys are obviously susceptible to things like hurricane and weather, the pandemic being one thing, but talk to me a little bit about that unique kind of situation that you're in where weather could be, pretty disastrous. I compare it oftentimes to, our customers in California when there were the fires that were happening recently, where you do need to communicate, and sometimes very quickly in emergency scenarios. I think you guys have gone through a few different storms that have affected the area.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how you approach both your employees as well as your members in times like that.
Yeah, and so, being in the Florida Panhandle, and we cover about, our physical footprint covers about 180 miles horizontally, right? So the likelihood that we are lucky in the fact that the likelihood a hurricane would knock out our whole network at one time is relatively not there, unless they're in succession and they're just hitting along the coast. But at the same time, is we have to be ready if something goes down, right?
Sure.
So we talk about backup centers, and we talk about uptime on communication and online banking and all our failovers and things like that, because members need it, right? And you make a great point that it's about the communication. Although hurricanes are disastrous and horrible, we typically know they're coming, right? Unlike a lot of other natural disaster situations. And so if we evacuate Pensacola or Tallahassee or wherever we're on the Panhandle and go north or go south or go east or go west, then we will probably have the ability to communicate there, right? It's not going to take down the whole
system. Yeah, the whole network. Yeah.
But that means we've got to be ready to communicate. So we talk about like, what does that look like? How do we handle that? How do we communicate with our teams? And then how do we communicate out with our members? We were in a very weird situation over the past, well, like it started in May of 24. So in May of 24, Tallahassee had 2 tornadoes go through town. I had never experienced a tornado in my life in this town, and they went unexpectedly. They weren't, early morning, but demolished a good portion of our town and knocked everything offline. I mean, our staff couldn't get in, everything shut down, and that was something we got a hurricane. We know how to handle that. It's coming. We know it's coming. Everybody's prepped. We can close in advance, let our members know. You have a tornado like that being the floor. We weren't used to that. So then you had the fall. We had a hurricane that came to Perry, which is about 45 miles east of Tallahassee. But it was supposed to hit Tallahassee and it veered off at the end.
Right.
We were prepped for that. Good thing is we had Pensacola. They were all sitting on go for whatever we needed. Well, you go back to this past January, we had 9 inches of snow in Pensacola, and we had 3 inches of ice in Tallahassee in the same night. Something else, again, we were not prepared for. We're Florida. We're the Sunshine State. You might get a little bit of sleet every 5 years or so, but the last time it had snowed in the Panhandle, especially in the Tallahassee area, I was probably 8 years old. I might even still have some in my freezer. Let's put it that way, because that's how few and far between you got that. So that was an instance where we had to shut all of our network down for 4 days because Pensacola was buried under snow, Tallahassee was buried under ice, and Panama City in the middle had both. We were not prepared for that, and we were as prepared as we could be. We knew it was coming. We expected it. We didn't expect to the extent it would happen. So that was a whole different, kink in the chain for us because we had never done it. So that was, had just launched part of our texting, chatting features, things like that to really be more robust. But I promise you, if we'd had about 4 more weeks lead time, it would have been a lot better.
Right.
But we were in constant communication with our local officials on when can we send people to check a branch? When can we get back out there? And they're like, you can't. Roads are frozen or they're snowed in. And it wasn't like it just came overnight and left the next day. It was there for a week.
Yeah.
There was ice on the ground in Tallahassee for a couple weeks that melted off.
You just had to wait till it melted off.
Right. And again, being in Florida, being where you guys are, you might be used to. We're not used to that. Nobody knows how to drive. Nobody knows how to operate. We've never experienced it in this lifetime. So, that was a whole different adventure that we might not see for another 40 years, but we can say we got through it.
I tell you what, Park, I when I lived in Texas for a little bit, and for those listening or watching, if you don't know, I'm born and raised in Montreal, Canada, so no stranger to snow and ice. And so the next time, if you guys get hit with an ice storm, 3 hours, I jump on a plane and I will handle all the driving that you guys need.
Right,
I can make it
perfect.
zipping in and out. I've never felt like more of a superhero in the state of Texas than when they had an ice storm and I was the only one that wasn't crashing into a ditch.
Right.
And so that was a lot of fun. There's one thing that I love, that the undercurring theme that you've had throughout this entire conversation, and maybe this is a perfect transition into it, is your consistent approach to collaboration. And so whether it's change and you get buy-in from the team, or you're working with local officials or groups that you're working with, the collaboration in the credit union industry is unique in and of itself. It's probably the only industry out there that, quote unquote competitors will share information with each other in order to make each other stronger. You don't really get that, anywhere else. However, one of the things that you've done in, kind of harnessing the power of collaboration, especially on leadership, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the experience that you had when you were working with another credit union, Schools First, most notably, to take a look at operations and walk us through that experience. Because one, I think it's wildly interesting. Two, I think this is something that has been utilized by some credit unions, but maybe this conversation helps credit unions either adopt more of these programs, or, maybe I'm making Schools First even more busy for the back half of 2025. Sorry to Schools First. Love you guys. But Park, I'd love for you to kind of explain what it is that I'm alluding to here in the collaborative effort between you and Schools First.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, we were able to take our whole senior leadership team. So there were 8 of us, and we were able to go visit schools first for a week. We had some mutual connections there. They welcomed us in, and we not only spent time learning and talking with their senior leadership team, and their C-suite and things like that, but we also had the ability to take our individuals and plug them into the like departments that for what they do. Now, they might be the only person in our department, right? That do that, but they have a whole business unit or department, with Schools First, and really just to understand how they do it and why they do it every day, and what they have found works and doesn't work. Given we're a tenth of their size, okay, so we are not a competitor, but even if we were a competitor, Schools First is known for being that institution that, they thrive in that environment because again, they understand the cooperative principle of, us helping each other. And that's what we do, So the idea in that was to go out there. We did some strategic planning on our side while we were there. But the biggest thing was really to understand that we're not going to do everything they do necessarily, but they can help us maybe be a little better at what we do, on a daily basis. Or they can give us ideas, or they can help provide information to us that we can translate back to the way we do it. It was a great experience. They welcomed us with open arms. I think we were one of the first groups that had been to visit them like that since the pandemic. And again, Schools First has always been the leader in this. So, to have the ability to go there and spend time with them was amazing. And with that though, I'll tell you, we do it with smaller institutions too. We collaborate and discuss and bounce ideas off every person in every institution we can, just to get another opinion on it, or how are you doing this, or what's worked and hasn't worked, or things like that. So that's important for us because again, when we talk about this collective and cooperative nature, is we've got to get better, and the way we get better is helping each other get better. You don't see that on the banking side, because there's a stock price involved in that.
Yep.
And I understand that, totally get it. On ours, though, is, we all know that the end goal is to help the members to the best of our ability and provide what they need when they need it. The only way we do that is talk to each other about instances and scenarios and try to get the best case plan together. So,
talk about a use case to making sure that you keep the nonprofit status, because that changes everything in terms of how you're going to collaborate. Park, if you had something to say to another credit union leader who's a little bit more hesitant to share or to ask help across institutions or other credit unions, what would you tell that leader?
Don't be scared and just pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and call a CEO or someone close to your location. Call one across the country. Call one of your trusted partners or vendors and say, I need to ask someone about this. Connect me with someone. I think once you do it once, you're going to realize that it is such a easy ask and a well-received ask. That's the biggest thing too, is that if I answer my phone, anybody call me, I might not have the answer, but I might know someone that can help.
Right.
And I might learn something along the way with you on that, so
Right.
that's the biggest part to me.
It's a powerful message. And it's actually one of the reasons why we wanted to start this podcast, was to, talk to people about, the journey that they've been on in the credit union industry, what it is that they're doing, how they see this. And it's amazing how much of a network has been created. And to be fair, a lot of you guys know each other already.
We do, yeah.
Through a lot of organizations and associations that are there. But yeah, pick up the phone, ask, talk about it, share the experiences, the trials and tribulations, as well as the success stories, because in the end, it makes the industry stronger as a whole.
It does. And your partners, and we call them partners, we don't like to call them vendors, because there's a huge part of that component to anything. We make it known very early on when we're looking to take on a new partner that we expect you to be there, not just to be selling us something. We want to talk to you. We want to see you at events. We're going to invite you to things, whether they're social or business. When we do events with our team, we want our partners there meeting them, because then they understand the importance of that partnership. And it's not just we're a contract number on the other side.
Well said. And actually, in a short period of time, maybe about a month or so, we will see each other in real life for the first time, where we get to shake hands in Jackson Hole. We're hosting a leadership summer where you and the rest of your executive team, or some of your executive team, will be there. So I am very excited to shake hands. Park, are you guys doing anything else? Like what are you doing for the back half of the year, aside from the leadership summit, of course?
So we're embarking on a whole new strategic plan. That's kind of our big thing this year. Also, we are constantly working on new projects. We have a project list that's ongoing of big rocks that we want to try to move this year or next year, and really working to be that proactive. That we have a meeting next week because we know we're at the halfway mark of the year. We got to start talking about next year now. We know we have stuff to do this year, but what's going to happen after December? And so that's really our big things. Really, we're doing some soul searching on getting back to who are we. Who do we want to be? Who do our members need type thing? And how do we transition that to a new multi-year setup for us?
I love it. I love it. Well, I know that you just spent a little bit of time with some of the other Eltropy teammates of mine, and just a quick shout out to Joe Cameron, who helped set this up when we were discussing potential people to come in here. I don't think he even blinked before he said your name, and I know exactly why, so just a quick shout out to him. I think you got to spend some time with Cody Willis, Sasha Bordenero, Mark Damon, a number of our teammates, and I think they were excited to be down there with you guys, and I think it was a good time to, just business aside, create a relationship between the two of us, so that way when there's something that happens, right, be it a hurricane, a tornado, changes in the industry, even sometimes from time to time, this might be a shock, technology breaks down and you need a fix, you feel comfortable picking up the phone and reaching out to your partner, so that way we help out.
Right.
Yeah. And so I believe that's the essence of what it is that you're trying to shoot for. And that's a very, very close cultural aspect that we have as well. Park, as I wrap this up, any parting comments, something that you want to talk about, the credit union, your team, anything that you want, just as a final send off to the team?
I appreciate the opportunity for you to allow Loyalty to be on this platform. I am very lucky that I work with amazing people every day. I interact with an amazing board and our amazing members. We appreciate everything Eltropy is doing and has done for us so far. We continue to want to expand that relationship as we go through this, because everything seems to be working really well. So just keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate it, and whatever we can do to help further that along, we're here.
Those are very, very kind words, and I know that we're incredibly proud to help serve you, your team, the members that you serve, and the communities that you serve. Again, a happy 1-year anniversary, and Park, many, many more of these anniversaries I hope we get to celebrate together. You are an inspiration. You are a leader. You are certainly an early adopter of some things. You are not scared of change. And I think the way that you communicate is exemplary. And I'm fortunate and blessed that we got to make the contact. And unfortunately, you're not going to get rid of me. So we'll probably be having a lot more chats.
That's okay. Remember, you guys are a partner. You're in it with us.
Exactly. All right, gang. Well, this concludes our latest episode of the Eltropy Exchange. Thank you for joining us, and join us next time on our next episode. Stay connected, stay empowered, and it'll be a pleasure to speak with all of you guys again. Park, thank you again for spending your holiday with us and a little bit of time. I look forward to shaking your hand in the near future, sir.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Eltropy Exchange podcast. For more insights and resources, visit us at eltropy.com. We'll see you next time.